Are live for the first time in what feels like north of a week now, I believe, on the platform. We have some breaking news to get into of some form or fashion here, some reason to go out of our way to do an active live show on the WardyNYM platform when everything else has been very hush-hush thus far this offseason for the Mets, as playoffs are still underway in the AL and NLCS, as we know, folks. But we're not here to talk about playoff baseball. We are here to talk about the new hires for the New York Mets, as they have not only anointed as their new hitting coach, that being Mr. Jeff Albert, that we're going to break down more on in a second, but they also have hired a new bench coach, that being Kai Correa. Two guys you probably aren't overly familiar with as an average Mets fan. That's okay, because my job today is to break down each and every one of you what you guys need to know about these hires. And listen, I'm going to tell you right away, as someone who gasses up almost every single move the Mets do under the sun for both justified and maybe not so justified reasons looking back, and I've apologized for maybe getting over my head, getting too excited about the Albert Almora Jr.'s or the Kevin Pillars of the world, if you know, going all the way back to the Mets 2021 season. That is how long ago we started this platform, and a lot has changed under Steve Cohen since. And when we talk about not only the bench coach hire and Kai Correa today, which I'm really excited to, but I'm most excited, truthfully and selfishly, to break down here shortly what you guys need to know about the Mets' new hitting coach here and Jeff Albert, because he's been in the organization already, and what this man has done has been nothing short of wonders for the organization. So when I tell you that I only view these two hires as positive moves for the organization, but I think the Mets are, instead of moving at best lateral or backwards, absolutely moving forward with that forward way of thinking. The way that Antoine Richardson was night and day the best first base coach in all baseball this year. He made the slowest team on paper, I'm not even exaggerating as I say this, the slowest collective team in Major League Baseball was the New York Mets, at least out of the National League the past year. And there was no team that was greater in their individual base running than the New York Mets. That was all thanks to Antoine Richardson and the great work that he has done as Mets first base coach, great base running coach, and he comes from Gabe Kapler's San Francisco Giants throughout the early 2020s that we saw. And since then, everybody, the Mets have now hired another coach from that crop of coaching staff from 2020 to 2023 range, and Kai Correa for their bench coach role. He's most formerly of the Cleveland Guardians this past year. We'll get into what he has done versus what he will do for the Mets moving forward. But I want to see your initial reactions, thoughts, and most importantly, analysis to these initial hires by the New York Mets, everybody, because let me tell you, I completely understand every single Mets fan that maybe looked at the bench coach role in particular and said to yourself, I want to see a grizzled veteran in there. You know how we just had Gibby in there, who's no longer part of the organization? I want a Ron Washington. I want, say, a Clint Hurdle. I want someone who has the experience and can have the whereabouts to understand today's game while understanding the past time's game as well. Instead, the Mets don't go with a grizzled veteran hire. They go with an unbelievably progressive, young, exciting hire at bench coach. And on the hitting coach end, what's very fascinating about what the Mets did here today that we're going to break down in a second. And let's see here, in true Wardy fashion, overhyping every Mets move, Dixie, my goal today is to break down for you guys what you need to know about them. It is up to you to have your respective opinions the same way that I'm going to have mine. It's perfectly fine if you disagree or think I'm talking out my you-know-what, that's fine. But everything that we are relaying today is to a T what we know officially about these people and why you should at least be at minimum intrigued by this. And truthfully, and I'm not just saying this because the Mets just hired them, I'm saying this because of the fact that not only did they just hire these guys, but what they bring to the table is far greater than what I initially thought when I saw those names on paper. Because like many of you, I have the same gut reaction. Who's this? Who's that? I knew about Jeff to a degree because he's already been the Mets director of hitting development that we've seen in the organization since the start of the 2023 season or so, if not a little bit beforehand. But in the case of Kai Correa, he's the one that I really was unaware of up until the past hour that I've informed myself on since, that has me excited to break down each and every one of you. So to everybody first chiming in live on a replay for our latest breakdown here on the WardyNYM platform, all I ask is that you hit that like and subscribe on, as it's a fantastic way to support the platform, help us get to 250 likes to our live and reoccurring viewers. Thank you guys again for 35,000 subscribers. And as a thank you, we gave away a jersey to one lucky subscriber that'll be sent their way in the next week or so. And once we hit 36,000, in which we're only around 500 to 600 subs away, we'll be doing another jersey giveaway on the platform of whatever player that you guys want me to part with to one lucky subscriber here on the platform, just as a further thank you. And shout out to our mates and sponsors that make every single show here happen, that being at SeatGeek, that has you covered with all of your ticketing needs. Head over there to SeatGeek, guys, and utilize my promo code WARDY10 because you're going to save 10% off your next ticket purchase when, mind you, it's NHL season, it's NFL season, it's about to be NBA season. You got comedy shows, concert shows, all the things under the sun that you need tickets for. Our friends at SeatGeek have you covered. WARDY10 for 10% off. Link down below. You're welcome in advance. And Manta Sleep, head over to mantasleep.com and use my promo code WARDY, that is WARDY, because you're going to get 10% off the best sleep masks in the game today. And yes, am I saying that because they're a sponsor part? Sure. But am I also saying that because I utilize their sleep mask every single night and a half for the past 2.5 years? That is 1000% a fact. I love Manta Sleep masks. I rock them every flight I'm on, every long drive I'm on. If I'm in the passenger not having to worry about driving, get a little nap in, or anytime I'm going to bed, I kind of can't sleep without it now. So, you know, you could think that's a good or bad thing. That's completely up to you. I love it though. It's very comfortable. Check them out, mantasleep.com, Wardy, for 10% off. Now let's get into this and let's talk about these hires, everybody. And let's begin with the man that you guys see beside me here, that being Jeff Albert. Initially broken today from Jeff Passan of ESPN. You know, if you're going to get a Jeff Passan bomb regarding the New York Mets here in mid-October, sadly, it ain't going to be anything that they're doing on the playoff front, but it will be something that they're doing on the hiring front. As we see here, New York Mets Director of Hitting Development, Jeff Albert, will be in charge of the Major League team's hitting program in 2026. Sources tell ESPN. Albert will be in uniform and help fill the void left by the firings of hitting coaches Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez. But it doesn't stop there, because when I initially read that, without getting to the second post, and shout out all you guys watching live at a replay, I appreciate every single one of you guys. We'll get to your comments, questions, concerns, all that fun stuff here in just a little bit. In the meantime, let's break down more on Albert, because as Jeff follows up, he says, Albert, 44, served as hitting coach for the St. Louis Cardinals and then joined the Mets in 2022. So I misspoke. I was off by a year. He came in the Mets in 2022. New York's farm system is teeming with good young bats, and the plans to have Albert run hitting at the major league level and complement him with another hitting coach, as sources said. So what does this mean? To anybody that's wondering, oh my God, are the Mets going back to the co-hitting coaches? No. Listen to the verbiage of Jeff Passan here in particular. You're going to have someone be hired to complement with another hitting coach, but what's been reaffirmed is that whoever the Mets hire as that other hitting coach will be reporting to Jeff Albert, meaning that Jeff is going to be the man leading the charge here for the Mets, and it should not be as much of a 50-50 look as we saw in years prior under Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes. Jeremy Barnes, who was the Mets hitting coach since right around not even halfway through the 2021 season after the Mets abruptly fired Chili Davis under the Zach Scott regime. Barnes, who was analytically driven, came in and didn't do all that great of a job for the Mets to conclude that year, and then stayed in that role, but paired with Eric Chavez, who came over in a lateral move after initially being hired by the Yankees, comes to the Mets instead, and Chavez and Barnes try to pair together in this kind of 50-50 effort. One has more the numbers, the other is more the in-game feel, the kind of mind, the veteran, the former major league player experience that you have in Chavez. And Chavez said point blank to the media and his departure to the Mets over the past week and a half, 2 weeks, that the Mets should not run it back with co-heading coaches. And as a response to that, the Mets are not technically running it back with co-heading coaches, but they are running it back with two forms of coaches to help them on the heading front. Now, before Mets fans want to scream and shout and let it all out, if you know, you know, let me enlighten you that every single team not named the dumb Artie Moreno LA Angels have at least two hitting coaches. So it's not foreign for the Mets to continue to do what they've done with at least two hires in that position. We have yet to officially find out who that second hitting coach is going to be for the Mets. But what we do know already is that whoever the Mets go out of their way to hire, that person will likely be the lesser of himself and Jeff. Meaning, as I stated already, that you're going to have Jeff be the man that's being reported to by whoever the other hitting coach is going to be. So Albert is leading the charge here. What is very exciting about this is that this hire for the Mets is unbelievably significant when you bear in mind what the structure of their offense has been. What has been a major gripe that this Mets offense has had each of the past 2.5 years, especially when we evaluate batters that have power but have instead went more the slap hitting spread for all fields route instead of actually for pulling and lifting baseballs. Cough cough, Eric Chavez ruining everyone's approach. And I say that loosely because obviously that's not entirely true. I'm just digging in on the guy because I did not enjoy Chavez's time as a New York Mets coach, regardless of the Mets being basically top 5 in WRC plus and most other offensive numbers. That was very much inflated by Juan Soto and the other greats in the top 4 of this lineup, if you actually paid attention to the normal 162 in the highs and certainly the lows the Mets had on the offensive end. But where the Mets had highs this past year offensively was all in the minor leagues. You guys saw it. I saw it as well. From Port St. Lucie to Brooklyn Syracuse, pardon me, not Brooklyn Syracuse, to the Brooklyn Cyclones, to the Rumble Ponies in Bainton, to the Syracuse Mets. What did pretty much all of these teams have in common for the Mets in the minor leagues? Their hitting philosophy became night and day over the past couple of years. That is why we saw the Brooklyn Cyclones win the championship in their division. That's why we saw, as well as the Rumble Ponies, win their respective championship. It wasn't just backed by great pitching, it was also backed by great fundamental offense that has completely changed since Jeff was appointed as the Mets hitting director. And the reason why we make note of this, everybody, is because when you go back to Jeff initially departing from the St. Louis Cardinals organization before the 2022 season began, he was by all means not someone that the Cardinals want to lose. Ownership was pissed off when Jeff walked out the door when his contract expired. And his excuse at the time, reportedly to the media, was that he did not appreciate the criticism given to him as the active hitting coach at the time over his couple-year stint with the St. Louis Cardinals. And I don't blame him for not appreciating that criticism, because what Jeff has done during that stint with the St. Louis Cardinals, everybody, let me enlighten you. You know how we just talked about specifically pulling baseballs, fly ball rate, all that kind of stuff? Well, the St. Louis Cardinals were literally the best in Major League Baseball during Jeff's time as their hitting coach. So for pulled fly balls to actually get out of the ballpark, to stop it with the stupid slap hitting, to stop it with all these balls are going to fall short there on the warning track because there's a lack of approach. Jeff was brilliant in advancing the offense for this Cardinals team. And as we have all seen in real time, what has been a commonality with the St. Louis Cardinals since that season, since Jeff has left? Their offense has been so Jekyll and Hyde. They have not had nearly as many things in unison because he was really cooking up something well with the Cardinals, which led him to being appointed as the Mets director that we talked about today, now getting to the point of not just being the Mets hitting director, but now being their actual hitting coach. Because what he has done in the minor leagues, look at Jacob Reimer, a great example of someone who's developed in the Mets hitting lab profoundly over the past year. Jacob Reimer went from being a no-name prospect to being a guy that you could argue we could see hit the Major League level next season as a very plus bat that's skyrocketing the farm for the Mets this year, including the great job that he did for the Rumble Ponies. He's just one of many prime examples that we saw really blossom thanks to the great Mets hitting philosophy that they had in each of their respective minor leagues over the past year and a half, 2 years now. So the Mets going internal with this hire, normally I don't love the idea of staying internal, but I love it in this case because this is very much a David Stearns type of move. Someone who not only has been a part of the organization the past couple of years, but someone who completely understands what has been trending right versus what's been trending wrong and the Mets hit approach. And the reason why I'm so ecstatic and kind of salivating at the mouth to see what Jeff can do to this offense is because it is quite contrary to the Eric Chavez point of view and mindset. Not only is it quite contrary based off of the numbers I just relayed to each and every one of you from what he did during his time in St. Louis. They were really the best in baseball per Fangraphs. Number one, shout out Carson on X. He knows exactly who I'm talking about right now for when I first saw that statistic, because that is so unbelievably important. This Mets team has been so fickle, not only with pulling baseballs, but with having a lack of approach with what this player is supposed to be. And yes, Ethan, he's still suspect, no doubt about it. But the point is Reimer in one single year in the minor leagues for the Mets went from being a guy no one was talking about to now everybody has been raving about in the minor leagues this past year. And it doesn't just stop with him. We look at the AJ Ewings, who's a speed demon, as well as the great hit tools that he displayed and only got better every single level that he was promoted to in the minor leagues. The continued great development of Jet Williams, Carson Benjamin, many others, guys. The Mets had a lot of things cooking right in the minor leagues this year. And the reason why I'm going out of my way to break this down for each and every one of you simply has to do with the fact that not only is Jeff here to be that guy, but when you guys are wondering, who is Jeff Albert? What can he bring to the table, this is what he can bring to the table. It's a great young savvy mind who's been in the organization the past couple of years that was highly desirable that the Mets were thankfully able to pick up and not even have to appoint two active hitting coach. You know, the fact that the Mets got a guy that was the previous hitting coach of the Cardinals to then not even be in that hitting coach role for his first 3 years here is great because it's given him time to marinate, develop well, and the organization in the minor leagues with these young batters. So now when we see Carson Bench, Jet Williams, Jacob Reimer, AJ Ewing, the list goes on and on. Once these guys get a taste of the major league level, they're already going to have a familiarity and a rapport to a degree with Jeff because one, he's already been here, and two, he has pretty much been to a degree the hitting savant behind what has went right for them in their philosophy in each of the past 2.5, 3 seasons now. So that is very exciting. Xavier, thank you for the donation. Maybe too soon have I seen the Scooble rumors. They have literally been nonsensical rumors, just people throwing out potential, if he's available, let's throw out a mock trade, that kind of thing. Tarek Skubal is not getting traded this offseason. If Tarek Skubal gets traded this offseason, I will give away 2 brand new New York Mets Tarek Skubal jerseys if he gets dealt to the Mets, because it ain't happening, 1, and 2, he is not going to be traded. You really think the Tigers are going to trade away Tarek Skubal this offseason? I know his value is at a high, but the difference between how the Tigers operate and those schmucks in Pittsburgh is that Paul Skeens will rot away his talent unless he's dealt prior, whereas the Tigers are actually building something. You can respect what the Tigers are doing. They actually have a right head on their shoulders and moving in the right direction. Even if they're being more penny on the dollar what they're spending, they're actually moving upward with their heading philosophy. The Pirates are pond scum, and they will continue to be exactly that until they find competence, which is a different owner, because their owner decides not only to not spend, but not to make the proper hires either. And that is all I have to say about that. Let's not talk about things that clearly aren't going to happen this offseason, things that are actively happening, like these hitting coach hires and bench coach hires for the New York Mets. So that is what we're getting there, just a sneak peek. And Jeff, everybody, and if you want to know more about him, I will relay some articles for you guys to check out, link down below once we're after being done live here. Each and every one of you guys continue hitting that like and subscribe on your way, and I really appreciate it as we're breaking down the new hires for the Mets, as we're now going to go from the Mets hitting coach now and Jeff Albert as we await to find out who is going to be hired basically under Jeff as the other hitting coach going into the 2026 season. I'm sure we'll find out in coming days potentially. But in the meantime, let's get into the other hire of significance for this New York Mets team, because that has everything to do with, yes, you guessed it, Kai Correa. And the joke here is that no one guessed it. You were fooling yourself if you had even a simple clue as to who Kai Correa was, more than likely, before we're talking about him today. So don't be on your high horse acting like you know, because, buddy, you probably don't know. And that's okay, because I'm not going to sit here and act like I knew who Kai Correa was confidently an hour and a half ago. I'd be a schmuck for saying that. And listen, I'm a schmuck for a lot of things, but what I'm not a schmuck for is what I'm about to say about Kai, because this is a hire in similarity to Jeff that I love, because the Mets are going with a forward way of thinking. They're going with a progressive way of thinking. And while I still am not at all opposed or privy to the idea of hiring a veteran, a former player type, a guy who's been around the block for a while, to make sure that you have a guy that can kind of make sure that the Mets have their heads on straight throughout the course of the year, I'm not opposed, and that's why we should hire Ron Washington as our third base coach, and I will beat that drum until it doesn't happen. But in the meantime, let's talk about Kai Correa. Not related to Carlos Correa, and no, he's not related to Stephen Kwan, because I thought it was a hilarious comment under the initial SNY article. Someone commented right away, I think it was a follower of mine to me, said that's Stephen Kwan, because he has the guards hat on too, so I can understand maybe why you thought that by first glance, even though that's wrong to say, because what is right to say is that Kai Correa was formerly the coach and the organization for the San Francisco Giants from 2020 to 2023. And I want to give a big shout out to my dog, my guy, Pat Ragazzo. Pat had the scoop first today. Jeff Passan gave him credit. Everyone else in the land did, rightfully so. Pat was first to drop this news on Kai Correa today, and he states that was the San Francisco Giants bench coach from 2020 to 2023, and most recently Cleveland's field coordinator and director of defense, base running, and game strategy the last 2 seasons. In case you guys are unaware, the Guardians have been brilliant when it comes to not only base running, defense, but pretty much every aspect imaginable with how to run proper fundamental baseball that we've seen the past couple of years. And Kai Correa has been at the precipice of exactly that. Pair that with what he did during his time with the San Francisco Giants, not only does he have great rapport with one that being in Antoine Richardson. Richardson, the Mets first base coach, was paired with Kai during their respective time with Gabe Kapler's run as manager for the San Francisco Giants. But Correa already has an appetite as a bench coach, has been there, done that before, and is another very forward mind. I've heard nothing but raving reviews about both Jeff and about Kai that what we have seen about respected people in the industry over the past couple hours here at the time of us being live right here, right now. And I also had a follower of mine, shout out to Bavarian Mets fan, who sent me a couple clips on Kai that I'm actually going to show you in a second, of him talking to some players during his time as a San Francisco Giant, just kind of some of the philosophies that he has from either hitting or base running, whatever the case may be. Point is that I'm really excited about the hires that the Mets brought in here. It's not just because they're new hires. You're always excited about new blood, but I'm also excited about the fact that the Mets brought in people that are now David Stern's hires. No more can we look at it and say, okay, this wasn't a David Stearns move, so you can't give him benefit of the doubt there. No. This is now going to be a completely built coaching staff with David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza's hands all over it. Meaning that if we get to the first half of next season and Carlos Mendoza is severely underwhelming, do not be surprised if the Mets make a change there. The same way that if things go awry completely with multiple aspects of this coaching staff and not one particular thing, not saying it's going to happen, but we know that things can look great on paper and then by no means mean to actually getting to success at the major league level. Should that be the case with various aspects of this coaching staff, what do you say? You look right at David Stearns. So now this is David's time to prove us fans wrong and for him himself to prove himself right with the moves that he made for this organization moving forward. Because the interesting thing about Kai is that Kai's name was thrown in the ring as a potential managerial candidate for multiple teams, as we saw an abundance of teams already part ways with their previous managers from the end of the 2025 season, most recently that being a Mike Shelt, who actually retired as manager for the San Diego Padres. So there's multiple teams right now looking for new managers, and Kai was deemed by many across the land as a potential fit for exactly that. Instead, he stays in this organization, and I really think that this is going to continue to bode the Mets well. And let me show you guys a fun little line here that I got from Kai himself here. Again, shout out to Bavarian Mets fan for sending this my way. And then we're going to expand more on Kai, what he's done for the San Francisco Giants during his tenure there, what he's done for Cleveland, and ultimately what he can do here for the Mets moving forward. It goes without saying, the Mets are hiring people that are going to hopefully only move them forward when it comes to great base running, improving their defense significantly, and pulling and lifting baseballs. That has been, without a doubt, a massive bugaboo with aspects of this Mets offense. They have been so Jekyll and Hyde, so feast or famine. Now we can finally, hopefully, find more of a balance, but one that's going to be backed by power. Because, folks, as we have seen with yet again this latest playoff run in real time, what is carrying teams outside of great pitching, like what we saw Blake Snell do last night, carving up those batters? It's to pull and absolutely blast baseballs. This Mets team, like any team in baseball, will get absolutely nowhere if they are not having the home run ball be constantly apparent. It's not something that you need to lean in on fully where you don't have any proper hitting or doubles, whatever the case may be. You need that balance, because the Phillies didn't have it, and they got cooked in the LDS because of exactly that, because they had so much feast or famine in their lineup. But the point is that what we have seen time and time again, year after year after year, is that every single team, for the most part, that goes out of their way to win the World Series has home runs leading the charge along with great pitching. The Mets had plenty of home runs this season. We're one of the better ones in baseball, but they struggle to find proper dimension. They're 5 through 9 in their lineup because of a lack of not only consistent hitting, a lack of development with guys that were fickle in the lineup, like Mauricio Cunha, etc., and just, inconsistencies with the unhealthy and also the inconsistent sophomore slump of a Mark Vientos who didn't know where he was playing each day. A Brett Beatty who thrived in the second half, no doubt, so I'm not going to pick on him, but a lot of other things just didn't go right for the Mets this year. Sean, thank you for the donation. He says, I love these moves, and he's become a member again. Thank you so much for that, Sean. I appreciate that. And Rebecca, I mean this in the sweetest way possible. If you put Carlos Mendoza's name in the same breath as Aaron Glenn again, I'm going to crash out. I'm not even a Jets fan, but I have common sense to know that Carlos Mendoza took his team in year one, 11 games below 500, to 2 games shy of the World Series, whereas Aaron Glenn has started his head coaching tenure as a Jet 0-6. So unless the Jets go on and win the next 12 games, make playoffs, and get all the way to the AFC Championship just to lose, miss me with that nonsense. What are we talking about here? Like, actually, what are we talking? That's the most asinine comparison I've seen in a hot minute, from a Mets coach to something separate. Don't even talk about him. My God, don't even put that stank on Mendoza. I know Mendy was not good this year, but gee, like, come on. The Mets were still above 500. What are we doing here? Aaron Glenn? I'm trying to enjoy my day, Rebecca. Don't ruin it for me. All right, let's go and let me show you guys an interesting quote here. Some interesting remarks from Kai Correa. This goes back to his time as coach, at the time, bench coach for the San Francisco Giants. I just want to show you kind of just some of the ways that he speaks and his way of thinking. I find it interesting, and I think you guys will too.
So if there's a guy with a gun and a guy with a knife in the fight, right, the guy with the gun should know he can take his time. He's got the better weapon. We only can go as fast as we still have a good grip. So you don't have to go slow, but so fast that our grip's bad is not worth the speed. So you have a pistola here. Make sure you get it in a good spot before you use it. Rushing is for people who can't throw.
Yeah, I like the analogy there. I like the breakdown by Kai and his simplicity in talking to these guys. And I think not only is Kai going to bode so well for this team to pair with Antoine Richardson again, because these guys were two peas in the pod helping the Giants prevail, not only with the great defense that they had in aspects of the tenure that he had there from 2020 to 2023, their base running that we saw by all accounts. So the Mets, the youth movement is looming large, not just for what I anticipate that they will do for their roster next season, but also what I anticipate that they're going to be doing for their entire coaching staff. Like, it is clear as day that from not only internal promotions that they're going to have with batters getting into next season, like Jet Williams, like Carson Bench, potentially Jacob Reimer, on the outside looking in for sure, AJ Reimer, and the abundance of pitchers that they have in the farm right now, pair that with the way that they've went about their operations. Eric Chavez was a very dinosaur way of thinking for this Mets offensive approach. Pair that with, a Gibby, who I love, have no ill will against at all, Mr. John Gibbons, as our bench coach. But how much did John really move the needle versus being just kind of that nice veteran voice to pair with Mendoza as Mendy was getting his footing down as a first-time manager? I think it's more that, the latter, than it is anything else. And I also believe that Eric Chavez was more just the wrong man for the job than it was about the Mets being completely at fault for their hitting philosophy. Because I don't agree with the idea of having two conflicting minds trying to mesh into one thing. That is clearly where it didn't work for the Mets this past year with both Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes. But having said that, it clearly has worked for basically every single team in Major League Baseball to have some sort of a balance with two hitting coaches instead of one. And the reason why I continue to mention that is because if the Artie Moreno ran LA Angels are the only team in baseball right now that isn't doing that, I'm going to go on a limb and say that the Mets are in the right direction, because Artie Moreno doesn't know his hand from his ass. This is a man who will continue to make sure the Angels get nowhere, even as they get set to hire the great Albert Pujols as their manager, because hiring a Hall of Fame player means nothing if that Hall of Fame player gives you the same exact regular season results he had with you as a player as he will as a manager. How are the Angels not going to be bad again when their roster construction is dog water and they consistently rush up prospects, don't properly develop them, and then, wow, color me shocked, they go ahead and do well elsewhere. It's idiotic. So what's the point here? The Mets running with two hitting coaches is not the problem. The problem has been the approach that they had with it from the past couple of years. Jeremy Barnes was very much more the analytics mind. Chavez has said verbatim how much he's not that kind of mindset at all. He's very against that, as a matter of fact, which is a problem when you're in today's game and you need these guys to be up to date with the numbers. Now, there needs to be a balance of the numbers. We know this as well. We have all sat here and complained about the same thing. Why is Carlos Mendoza rocking with that lineup? Because you look at the numbers, you say to yourself, it doesn't make sense. And then sometimes when you look at the numbers, it doesn't add up, and then it doesn't make sense. So what we know is that numbers are important, but they can be fickle because you need to have an in-game feel. Carlos Mendoza didn't have an in-game feel this year if it smacked him square across the face. We can probably all agree there. So what do the Mets need to do a better job of now moving forward? It's not only have guys that can make proper in-game adjustments, but also clearly have a feel for the game and similarity, if not better, than Mendoza. And I think that's what the Mets are getting here to a degree in Kai Correa, because Correa has all the makings of someone who very well could be a manager sooner rather than later in Major League Baseball. And that may happen with the New York Mets, depending on the future of Carlos Mendoza. But in the meantime, clearly Mendy's excited and is not opposed to this hire. Otherwise, I'm sure he would have voiced that to a degree to Stearns. Not that it really would have gone far per se, because again, it's Stearns' job to do what he thinks is best for the organization versus maybe what Mendy thinks here. But the point I'm trying to make is that as someone and myself as a Mets fan, like many of you, who initially went into these coaching staff vacancies with a lot of people on the board, we just broke down literally like 10 different coaching candidate options for the Mets over the past week. And the vast majority of those candidates are off the board already because the Mets have filled the void of bench and hitting coach. Not that they can't be hired for other positions, but at the same time, some of the guys that we talked about aren't going to probably accept a lesser job than the ones that have now been filled by the Mets. So now the Mets still have third base coach available. They still have catching coach available for the bullpen. They still have pitching coach available that we know. They still have other hitting coach that they have to do. There's still other aspects of this team that need to get rectified in the coming days and weeks, and they will do that. But for the time being, it is clear as day that the philosophy that the Mets are trying to bestow upon not only the players, but us fans to take moving forward is that they're not only looking to have a more progressive approach with their offense, but they're going to continue to have a very aggressive approach, both offensively and defensively. Because the Mets were just so behind the eight ball defensively this year, guys. I know that you might forget about it because this year is easy for us to forget as fans. But the Mets had so many games and clear defensive blunders that otherwise could have been avoided. I think just had competence from Pete Alonso at first base, trying to get a little underhand toss to first, or try to make a nice little grab there and center that's botched, or Brandon Nimmo bobbles a ball left somehow, or Mark Vientos, who should never be starting at third base, yes, you guessed it, starting at third base again. Whatever the case may be, the Mets need to upgrade this defense, and that is where we're hoping and we're leaning on a guy like Kai Correa to continue to further help in that regard. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that what we're going to get in Kai Correa is probably going to be so contrasting than what we were getting from John Gibbons that you guys may notice right away a completely different approach and a philosophy that this team has. God willing, it's hopefully for the better. That's what time will ultimately provide for each and every one of us. It'll be an answer to that. So I can sit here and gas up and tell you guys how much I like these hires just as much as the next guy, but it all comes down to performance. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys, take this, sleep on it, and then come to the conclusion that these are the best hires imaginable. That is not at all true. I'm not saying it's true. All I'm saying is what we know about these people is nothing but really positive things and glowing things. So you have the track record. You have things to be encouraged by. What can we take from that moving into next season? And that is the big question that we will hopefully get great answers to as soon as spring training rolls around and we can finally start to see these guys doing their job and hopefully doing it for the better here for a Mets team that's in dire need of stability on various aspects of their team heading into next season. Manuel, the $2 donation, thank you so much. I'll take a Scuba extra large, please. That's good, Manuel. Thank you so much for the donation. Let's go Mets, baby. Thank you kindly. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, to expand more on this, everybody, I do just want to take a collective look here on what was going a bit more for the Jets, not the Jets, I apologize, for the Giants, the San Francisco Giants records. Let's go over their record because from 2020 to 2023, the Giants had a good amount, they had a flash in pan success with a lot of veterans on their roster on their lineup that we saw with Gabe Kapler. The found a youth Giants is what Antoine Richardson and now Kai Correa were a part of. But what we saw, mind you, Kai Correa was a pivotal part in not only the great defense and base running and the overall logistics of how the Guardians played baseball this year, but look at what the Guardians did in back-to-back seasons with Kai right in the thick of things. They had a tremendous playoff run last year, leading their division, and they came out of nowhere this year, 10-plus games down on the Tigers in the month of effing September, and had an Atlanta Braves-esque run against our Mets that we saw from 2022. I know it still pains me, don't get me started, for the Guardians to rally all the way back and prevail and to win the division. It didn't mean much come postseason play, but that has more to do with the Guardians' incompetence to spend big dollars when they need to than it is having anything to do with player development or what things went right for them with Stephen Vogt as year 2 manager for them. But I digress. Getting back to the Giants here for a second, everybody. What we saw with Sanford, that was the year Michael Conforto was a Giant. Yes, Michael Conforto was with the Giants throughout, to a degree, the tenures of Kai Correa and Antoine Richardson. That is correct. In the season of 2020, the San Francisco Giants went 29-31. In 2021, the San Francisco Giants were drinking from the fountain of youth that we saw. We were all questioning, saying, how does this make any sense whatsoever? Because for me, it's not adding up. I gotta be honest with you guys. And it still isn't adding up to me. But Kai Correa, who was the bench coach at the time, big piece of that puzzle there. I don't know what he was serving up. I don't know what he was doing to get the best out of Brandon Crawford and Brandon Belt when we all thought these guys were cooked. Regardless, they had themselves a 107-win season, an anomaly year for Gabe Kapler as manager. 55 losses, but that was the peak of that coaching staff with everyone involved here. Then we get to 2022 for the Giants. They fall back to earth. They're a 500 baseball team, 81-81. In 2023, the final year as Gabe Kapler as manager there, and that we saw as Kai Correa as bench coach and Antoine Richardson there as first base coach, they finished the year just below 500 and missing playoffs, 79-83. So he's been, honestly, on some very successful teams between the Guardians' past 2 seasons, which have been fantastic, the big run that he had with the Giants in 2021. He's been on solid teams each of the past 5-6 years now. So I'm loving that. That's encouraging. Paired with Jeff, who during his time as the hitting coach for the St. Louis Cardinals, I cannot amplify enough. The Cardinals were the best pull fly ball baseball team in baseball. Literally the best in baseball. They were number 1, tippity top of the list. All thanks to Jeff and the San Francisco Giants. And this I may keep in the live stream. So, all right, folks, when we just take a look at overall offensive metrics per Fangraphs for the 2025 season, if we take a look at overall offensive metrics, where did the Cleveland Guardians stand? Now, obviously, Kai Correa wasn't the hitting coach, but he had a lot to do with what was going right for the Guardians paired with Stephen Vogt this year. So let's go ahead and let's see where the Guardians stood on their offense, given the fact that they did not spend much money this year. And Cleveland was ranked 24th in offense this year, which is very interesting. Pair that with their pitching, and their pitching obviously carried them this season. Cleveland's pitching, how did they wrap up on their pitching? Cleveland this year finished 12th in their pitching. Okay. Now when we take a look at, let's take a look at the batting. And let's go here, and let's go back to the 2021. I'm thinking, let's go 2021 here. And there's a good reason for this. In 2021, the 6th best offense in Fangraphs' wins above replacement was the St. Louis Cardinals. That was the final year for Jeff Albert as hitting coach for the St. Louis Cardinals. And that also included a 8% walk rate, a 22.3% K percentage, a 168 average of ISO, 287 on the BABIP, which is notable, 244 average, 313 on base, 412 slug. Again, good for top 6 in all Major League Baseball in offense. So that's what you got from Jeff Albert, who is now the Mets' primary hitting coach. From the last time that he was a hitting coach in Major League Baseball, his offense was top 6 in all the game. That is what I like to see. What I also like to see is that when I think of going back to Kai Correa during his time with the San Francisco Giants, let's just take a look at some of these numbers there during his time as bench coach. And let's start in 2020 in the shortened season, because in the shortened season, we saw the San Francisco Giants were top 6 in offense that year. The New York Mets were top 5, hilariously enough. Oh, wait, let me make sure that this is updating correctly. Yes, it is. Okay, good. So looking at this right now, San Francisco Giants top 6 in offense in the first year as bench coach for Kai Correa for Gabe Kapler's San Francisco Giants. Okay, now let's get into the second year under Gabe Kapler. They were 2nd in baseball. So mind you guys, I understand 4 seasons removed now. I completely understand the context. But in 2021, which was the final year of Jeff Albert as the hitting coach for the Cardinals, and the second year for Kai Correa as bench coach for the San Francisco Giants, those 2 teams were top 6 in Major League Baseball in offense that year. The Giants were 2nd, and they were the best in all the National League that we saw by a good margin that year. They were crazy with 107 wins. Then we fast forward to 2022, where the fountain of youth starts to come to an end for San Francisco. And the Giants that season fell off big time offensively, but just how much did they fall off here? Let's see. They fell all the way to 20th. Okay, so peaked massively that we saw. And I sincerely apologize. I'm looking at 2022. That was 2022 after the big 2021. So Kai Correa's first 2 years as bench coach for the San Francisco Giants, they were top 6 and then top 2 in baseball and offense. The third year, not so much, and then his final year as bench coach, where they were just below 500 that season, I can't imagine they were all that much better, and they weren't. They were 23rd. So whatever philosophy was initially working for the San Francisco Giants in his first couple years there, that being Kai Correa, soured after that 2021 season. Some other key metrics I want to go over more, and this is honestly far more in relation to Kai Correa than it will be about Jeff Albert, because Kai Correa is the one who was working, who was the field coordinator, working on base running, defense, and basically every aspect imaginable of the Cleveland Guardians. And I want to emphasize that because let's see how the Guardians were with their fielding this year in particular. Hot diggity dog, hot diggity dog, hot diggity dog, hot diggity dog. That is what we love to see, everybody. We're taking a look at the top defensive teams per Fangraphs this season. Who is number 3 on that list? Is, yes, you guessed it, the Cleveland Guardians. That's what we love to see. That is fantastic. There we go. Love to see that. Hype me up. That's great. Cleveland Guardians, top 3 in Major League Baseball in their fielding this season per Fangraphs. Now, let's get into how the Guardians were last year. Just in comparison, because Kai was with them each of the past 2 seasons. Guardians were 4th in baseball last year. Hype me up. Listen, it goes beyond the coaching staff. You obviously need the players to be a part of it too. That's very important. But to see the Guardians be a top 4 fielding team each of the past 2 years with Kai Correa there, as well as the great base running they have, which the Mets already have thanks to Antoine Richardson, that Kai, again, was former coaching teammates with during their time with the Giants from 2020 to 2023, as well as what Jeff Albert is planning to do for this offense. This, my friends, is the stuff that we look at when we try to figure out why the Mets make the decisions that they make. So, if you want to know a bit more numbers, especially when looking at Kai Correa, Mets new bench coach, as to kind of what they valued going into their decision-making to bring these guys in, all the numbers I've relayed to each and every one of you go in direct hand as to exactly that. And numbers are one thing. The end game feel is a complete other aspect of it all, which is why I'm really, really excited more than anything to, again, find out what the future holds for these guys. And, Wardy, you think there's some sort of leash on Stearns? To a degree, heck, to a degree. Let me put it this way. If the Mets don't make playoffs next year, David Stearns will not be president. That goes without saying. You really think Steve Cohen is going to allow a second straight year of not making postseason with Juan Soto on this team and the payroll that they have? Not a chance in hell. There is a far greater chance of David Stearns being fired at the conclusion of next season, should the Mets not making playoffs, than there will be for them to run it back with him. Because then that will have proven that David Stearns was not the right man for Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen, who spent 3 years trying to get access to speak to David Stearns when he was under contract with with the Milwaukee Brewers. Couldn't get it, obviously. Finally gets the opportunity to talk to him, and he hires him. He gets his guy, a New York native who grew up a diehard Mets fan that wants to succeed here. I think David Stearns is ultimately going to take this team where we want it to be. But it's going to take a lot of convincing this year and what went so terribly wrong in 2025. So, does he have a leash? Yes, he does have a leash. But is his leash as long as it doesn't matter what happens to the Mets next season? No, I think that's a silly comment to make. I think everyone will continue to be held accountable. Next will be Mendoza, and then beyond Mendoza, obviously, would be David Stearns. But you have to hope that we don't even find ourselves getting in that position, that these Mets coaches make the right decisions, fix their woes from last year to a degree, can stay relatively healthy, just as good as any other team in baseball, and move on from there. But Mets fans, that is going to do it for our live show. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And let me know your biggest takeaways, again, in the comments down below to our live and reoccurring viewers as we were breaking down the latest news. That is, the Mets have officially hired Kai Correa as their new bench coach, formerly of the Cleveland Guardians, and previously before that of the San Francisco Giants, and Jeff Albert, currently the hitting director of the Mets organization, now being viewed as her main hitting coach to pair with another coach that will be reporting to him that we'll find out soon enough on. Mets fans, thank you guys again to everybody watching. I really appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way out, and be on the lookout for more Mets content, more than likely dropping sometime tomorrow, barring changes. Love you guys to death. As always, no matter what, everybody, let's go Mets.